Gunfire tore into the concrete walls, spraying shards into the air. Alarms blared over shouted orders and the thud of mortars as smoke crawled across the ground, cloaking everything in gray and fire. Commander Nathan Cole's voice cut through the noise as he barked into the comms. "Hold your positions! If they break through here, we're done!" His SEAL team scrambled for cover. Then through the smoke and chaos, a lone figure in maintenance coveralls stepped forward. Adriana Vega, the woman they thought only swept up shell casings, was climbing the observation tower, a Mark 11 sniper rifle in her hands. No one believed it, until the first shot rang out and the battlefield shifted in an instant. The day always began before the sun broke over the horizon. By the time the first streaks of gold lit the naval amphibious base Coronado, Adriana Vega was already there, boots crunching on gravel, hands gripping a broom, a bucket of tools hanging from her shoulder. She wore the same brown maintenance coveralls every day, their seams faded from countless washes, their pockets stuffed with duct tape, cleaning cloths, and a small notebook she never let anyone borrow. The SEALs barely noticed her, and that was exactly how they liked it. In their eyes, Adriana was part of the scenery, no different from the battered concrete walls or the brass casing scattered across the shooting range. She moved quietly, sweeping spent shells into a bin, patching up torn target boards and restocking ammo crates. When they walked past her, they might nod out of habit, but rarely did they speak. To them, she was the cleaning girl, efficient, invisible, and irrelevant to the world of elite warriors. It wasn't arrogance that made them ignore her. It was the ingrained hierarchy of their world. Combat operators existed in a bubble of trust and capability, forged in blood and sweat. Support staff, no matter how competent, weren't part of that circle. But Adriana Vega wasn't just support staff. When the firing line was cold and the SEALs had moved on to the next drill, she would take her time resetting the range. Her eyes scanned the scattered targets not like a janitor checking for damage, but like a competitor studying a scorecard. She'd pick up a paper silhouette, trace the bullet holes with her fingers, and murmur under her breath. Slight drift. Wind must have shifted. Then she'd set it down and continue her work as if she'd said nothing. If anyone looked closely, they might have noticed the way she handled rifles during maintenance. Never casual, never clumsy. When she oiled a barrel, she inspected it with the same precision a jeweler gives a diamond. She understood these weapons, not just mechanically, but intimately. And there were little things, things that didn't fit the life of a maintenance worker, the way she could identify a rifle's make and model by the sound of its bolt cycling, the way she glanced at the wind flag before the SEALs began long-distance shooting, then subtly adjusted the target stands. Once, during a lunch break, a gust of wind caught a loose target board and sent it tumbling across the range. Without thinking, Adriana drew a marker from her pocket, sketched a precise windage adjustment on the back, and handed it to a confused petty officer who happened to be nearby. He stared at it, muttered, "Thanks," and walked away, never realizing she was exactly right. No one ever asked her how she knew. Every so often, though, a sliver of her past would slip through the cracks. A small, black and white photo kept inside her locker. A man in jungle fatigues, holding a rifle in one hand and a young girl in the other. A battered leather notebook filled with pages of tight, handwritten calculations, angles, distances, wind speeds. And the way her eyes would linger on the furthest steel targets at the range, the ones barely visible without optics, as if she were measuring them in her head. These fragments told a story no one bothered to piece together. To the SEALs, Adriana Vega was a ghost on the range. Always there, never noticed. She moved in their world but was not of it. They thought she existed only to sweep brass and replace paper targets. They had no idea that behind those calm brown eyes was a mind honed for precision, a lifetime of training buried under years of anonymity. And no one, not even Adriana herself, could guess just how soon her quiet, hidden skill would be forced into the open. Before Adriana Vega was the quiet figure sweeping brass on a SEAL range, she was a child standing in the Montana wind, the smell of gun oil and pine in the air, listening to her grandfather's voice, Master Sergeant Alejandro Spector. Vega was not a man who boasted about his past. His name was whispered in the kind of circles where records were sealed and stories were told in low tones. A Green Beret sniper during the most brutal years of the Vietnam War, he carried a confirmed kill count so high that even the military's official tally didn't dare put it in writing. But Alejandro never talked about numbers. He talked about the shots that mattered, the ones that changed the course of a battle or saved a life at the last second. The nickname Spectre came from the way he operated, never seen until it was too late. He could disappear in waist-high grass, in a stand of bamboo, or in the shadows of a ruined village. Enemy soldiers told stories of a ghost in the tree line, one that took a single shot and vanished without a trace. For Adriana, growing up with him wasn't about bedtime stories. It was about discipline. Before she learned to ride a bike, she learned to control her breathing. Before she learned multiplication, she learned to read wind by watching how the grass bent or how dust floated in a shaft of sunlight. Every Saturday, he took her out to the back pasture, where steel targets sat at distances most hunters wouldn't attempt. She learned to shoot prone, kneeling, standing, her small frame adjusting to the recoil through endless repetition. Patience is your first weapon, he'd tell her, adjusting her elbow by a fraction of an inch. The rifle is just a tool. The real shot happens in here. He'd tap her temple lightly. Their training was more than marksmanship. He taught her fieldcraft, how to blend into the terrain so completely that a deer could walk within arm's reach and never notice her. He made her practice lying motionless for hours, her body aching, her mind still. He'd hide objects in the brush and have her find them with optics, teaching her how to pick out what didn't belong. When snow fell, they trained in snow. When the summer heat baked the earth, they trained in the heat. Every condition, every variable, he drilled it into her until she could make a calculation in her head faster than most soldiers could consult a range card. And she loved it. She loved the ritual of cleaning a rifle until it gleamed. She loved the quiet focus of lining up a shot and the stillness before the trigger break. She loved the way her grandfather's rare smile appeared when her round rang steel at 1,000 yards. By the time Adriana was 18, she could outshoot most competitive marksmen. Alejandro entered her in civilian long-range competitions under a false last name so no one would connect her to him. She won more often than not, her performance baffling men twice her age with decades of experience. It seemed inevitable she'd follow in his footsteps. She scored perfect marks on military entry tests, aced every physical requirement, and shattered records on the range during basic training. But when she applied for a sniper designation, the system stalled her. The rejection was polite, couched in language about limited billets and operational needs. The truth was less official, but more obvious. Female snipers were still an exception, not a norm. In the eyes of the institution, her place was in support roles, logistics, communications, anything but the front line. At first, she fought it. She applied again and again, each time with recommendations from instructors who recognized her raw skill. Each time she was passed over for candidates with less accuracy, less stamina, and less tactical awareness. But the right gender, the right image. Then came the final blow. During a unit training evaluation, she was asked to demonstrate her shooting for a group of visiting officers. Her calculations for wind and drop were flawless. Her shots a tight cluster dead center at extreme range. The officers nodded in approval, but when her back was turned, she overheard one of them say, "Too bad we can't put that on a battlefield. Optics aren't ready for that kind of politics." It wasn't that they doubted her skill, they simply refused to imagine her using it where it mattered. So Adriana adapted. If they wouldn't give her a rifle on deployment, she'd put herself where rifles lived. Range maintenance at Coronado wasn't glamorous, but it kept her close to the weapons, the ammunition, and, most importantly, the training of elite shooters. Every hour she worked, she studied. She memorized firing drills, noted ballistic patterns, and cataloged the tendencies of every SEAL who trained there. It wasn't the life she'd envisioned, but her grandfather's lessons ran too deep for her to quit. Specter's granddaughter didn't walk away. She stayed in the shadows, watching, waiting, because one day she knew the system that kept her out might not matter. One day there might be no one else to take the shot, and when that moment came, she'd be ready. The morning at Coronado began like countless others, sharp, disciplined, and predictable. The sun had just cleared the horizon. throwing a pale gold over the base. The air smelled faintly of salt from the Pacific, mixed with the metallic tang of spent gunpowder, lingering from the previous day's drills. Adriana Vega moved along the 800-meter range, replacing torn targets with fresh silhouettes. The SEAL team was already deep into their training cycle, gearing up for an upcoming deployment in the Middle East. Commander Nathan Cole had them running a mixed routine, close quarters battle drills in the kill house, then transitioning to long-range precision fire. Every movement was timed, every shot monitored. From her position near the storage shed, Adriana could hear the muted bursts of automatic fire from the kill house and the crisp crack of sniper rounds further downrange. It was, for all intents and purposes, a normal day. Until it wasn't. At 0847, the first mortar round hit. The sound was unlike anything from training. Deeper, heavier. It struck the main administration building with a gut-punching thud, followed by a spray of debris and a column of black smoke clawing into the sky. A second explosion followed before the first shockwave had faded, this one closer, slamming into the perimeter fence and ripping through the chain link like paper. The alarm started immediately, shrill, urgent, cutting through every other sound on the base. Adriana's head snapped toward the source of the blast, and that's when the gunfire started. Not the controlled, disciplined bursts of SEAL drills. This was chaotic, overlapping, and far too close. Muzzle flashes sparked from the hills beyond the range, and the sharp crack of incoming rounds snapped past her ears, chewing into the concrete barriers around the shooting lanes. Over the comms, Commander Cole's voice roared, "Contact! Multiple hostiles inside the perimeter. This is not a drill." The attack was surgical in its timing. The shift change in security meant fewer guards on post, and the enemy had exploited it perfectly. They'd established elevated positions overlooking the ranges, giving them near-complete control of the open ground. Adriana dropped behind a stack of sandbags, instinctively scanning the terrain. From her position, she could see at least 2 enemy firing points on the ridgeline, each with crew-served weapons pouring fire into the SEAL positions. Dust and debris filled the air as the heavy rounds punched through cover that wasn't built for sustained combat. Cole's team was in a bad position. The kill house offered no safe exit under the sniper fire, and the open lanes of the range were a death trap. The SEALs took what cover they could, behind barriers, equipment sheds, and abandoned vehicles. But it was clear they were pinned. Then came the worst blow. Petty Officer Mark Dixon, the team's designated marksman, took a round clean through his shoulder as he shifted positions. He fell hard, his rifle clattering to the concrete. Blood pooled beneath him almost instantly. "Dixon's down! We need a medic here now!" a voice shouted over the comms. The team's combat medic was already moving, but he had to crawl under sustained fire to get to Dixon. Meanwhile, without their sniper, the SEALs were blind against the elevated threats. Every attempt to return fire from the ground was met with punishing accuracy from the enemy sharpshooters. Adriana's ears rang with the overlapping chaos. Cole issuing terse commands, gunfire hammering the barriers, the distant thump of mortars finding new targets across the base. She saw one SEAL lean from behind, cover to return fire, only to be driven back by a volley of rounds that shattered the cinder block inches from his face. Their ammo situation was getting worse by the second. Cole's voice over the comms confirmed it. "Rounds are running low. Hold what you've got until QRF gets here. ETA 15 minutes. 15 minutes might as well have been an hour. From Adriana's vantage point, she could see the enemy tightening their net, adjusting firing angles, cutting off possible retreat routes, and suppressing every position the SEALs tried to use. A fresh burst of gunfire ripped into the sandbags in front of her, sending a spray of dirt into her face. She didn't flinch. Her mind was already mapping the ridgeline, marking the flashes of enemy rifles, calculating distances without a rangefinder. Years of her grandfather's training surfaced without conscious effort. Wind direction from the drifting smoke, bullet travel time, angles from elevated terrain. Through the smoke and chaos, Adriana spotted Dixon's fallen rifle, the familiar shape of a Mark 11 sniper system, lying just 10 meters from her. It was angled toward the observation tower, a structure that would offer a commanding view over the entire engagement area. And in that moment, she realized 2 things. 1. The SEALs didn't have 15 minutes. 2. She could end this before the QRF even arrived. Her pulse slowed, her breathing leveled. The rest of the world might have been drowning in chaos, but for Adriana Vega, the battlefield had just gone quiet. Adriana Vega's eyes locked on the Mark 11 sniper rifle lying beside the wounded Petty Officer Dixon. The SEAL's blood seeped across the cracked concrete, the weapon's matte black barrel glinting faintly in the smoke-filtered light. Her mind was already made up before her body moved. In one smooth motion, she sprinted low across open ground, the air hissing as rounds zipped past her. She slid in beside Dixon, grabbed the rifle and checked the chamber. Half a magazine, plus one in the pipe. Not much, but enough if she didn't miss. "Vega, what the hell are you doing?" The voice was unmistakable. Commander Nathan Cole, crouched behind a barrier just 10 meters away, helmet tilted forward, eyes narrowed. His tone carried both disbelief and a razor's edge of anger. She looked at him evenly, the rifle cradled in her arms like it belonged there. "I can take those sniper positions from the tower." Cole's expression hardened. "You're a civilian contractor, not a combat shooter. This is not your fight. Your sniper is down. Your men are pinned. QRF is still out. You have a choice. Let me try, or watch them bleed out." Her voice was steady, cutting through the chaos without raising in volume. Cole's jaw tightened. Bullets smacked into the barrier beside him, spitting fragments into the air. He scanned the ridgeline, then glanced back at her. "You realize if you're wrong, you won't make it halfway up that ladder." Adriana's lips curved in the faintest ghost of a smile. "If I'm wrong, we're already dead." For a moment, Cole didn't answer. Then he ripped the spotting scope from his kit and tossed it to her, along with the team's radio headset. "You've got one chance, Vega. Make it count." Her hands closed around the gear without hesitation. She slung the rifle across her back, slipped the headset on, and adjusted the scope to her belt. The observation tower loomed ahead, steel frame, grated ladder, and no cover until the top. It might as well have been a spotlight in the middle of the killing field. She moved. The camera would track her from a low angle, boots pounding the dirt, debris exploding around her as rounds chewed into the ground. A mortar round landed nearby, the shock wave shoving her sideways, but she kept going. Her breathing was slow, controlled, each step deliberate. Bullets sparked off the tower's ladder as she grabbed the first rung. The metal was hot from the sun and gunfire, but her grip didn't falter. She climbed fast, keeping her profile tight to the steel. Halfway up, she paused just long enough to press herself against the side as another burst slammed into the structure, ringing like a church bell under siege. From below, Cole watched her progress, jaw clenched. One of his men muttered, "She's crazy." Cole didn't take his eyes off her. "Maybe, but she moves like she's done this before." At the top, Adriana crouched low, staying in the shadow of the tower's support beam. The world stretched out before her, the ridgeline, the muzzle flashes, the faint silhouettes of enemy spotters. She laid the Mark 11 across the railing, extended the bipod, and adjusted the scope. "Overwatch to ground," she murmured into the radio, her voice calm, clipped. "I have visual on target. Sniper, 2 o'clock, 612 meters. Calculating for wind and drop. Stand by." Through the glass, the enemy sniper came into crystal focus. He was tucked into a nest of sandbags, confident in his elevation and concealment. But the shimmer of heat in the air and the angle of drifting smoke told Adriana exactly how to dial her shot. She exhaled once, slow and deep. Her finger rested on the trigger, pressure building in fractions of an ounce. The world narrowed until there was only the crosshair and the man in it. The shot broke, clean, crisp. A heartbeat later, the sniper's head snapped back, his body crumpling into the dirt. His rifle slid down the sandbags, unmanned. "Holy!" One SEAL near Cole stopped mid-sentence, staring up at the tower. Cole keyed his comms. "Overwatch. Confirm target down." "Confirm," Adriana replied, already shifting the scope. "Acquiring next target." Below, the battlefield paused, not literally, but perceptibly. The incoming fire slackened just enough for the SEALs to register what had happened. Their maintenance girl had just taken the most dangerous gun off the field in a single, surgical shot. Cole's eyes flicked toward the tower again. the corners of his mouth tightening into something that wasn't quite a smile. "All right, Vega," he muttered to himself. "Show me what else you've got." And from that moment on, no one doubted she belonged up there. The first sniper's body hadn't even stopped rolling down the sandbags when Adriana Vega shifted her scope. She didn't celebrate. There was no fist pump, no verbal exhale of victory, only the quiet, mechanical precision of someone who knew the job wasn't done until the battlefield was silent. Overwatch to ground, spotter at 1 o'clock, 605 meters, moving target, taking the shot. Her scope tracked a lean figure with binoculars pressed to his eyes, crouched behind a rocky outcrop. A spotter's job was to guide the sniper, adjusting fire for wind and elevation. Take out the spotter, and the sniper's accuracy dropped by half. But in this case, with their main shooter down, the spotter had likely picked up the rifle himself. She led him by half a body's width, anticipating his next step. The trigger broke clean, and he dropped mid-stride. Target down, adjusting to suppress heavy weapons. From her vantage, Adriana spotted the flash of a crew-served machine gun tearing into the SEAL's cover. Its field of fire was forcing Cole's men to hug the dirt, unable to maneuver. The gunner was shielded by a wall of sandbags, but his assistant, feeding the belt of ammunition, was partially exposed. "Machine gun team, 900 meters. Engaging assistant gunner first." The round punched through the man's shoulder, spinning him away from the weapon. Without someone feeding the belt, the gun sputtered and jammed. Cole's men seized the opening, shifting to better cover as Adriana reloaded and lined up her next shot, this time directly on the gunner's firing port. The impact knocked him back, the weapon falling silent. "Ground, your right flank is clear for maneuver." So Cole's voice came back, tight but charged. "Copy that, Overwatch. Keep thinning them out." Adriana didn't waste time scanning aimlessly. She moved systematically, sector by sector. Every target was chosen for effect, not just opportunity. She prioritized threats in this order. 1. Long-range shooters, snipers and marksmen who could pin the SEALs from safety. 2. Eyes, spotters, binocular observers, and anyone relaying positions. 3. Teeth, heavy machine guns and crew-served weapons capable of shredding cover. 4. Mobility, anyone moving to flank or reposition for advantage. Her next shot took down a runner carrying fresh ammo toward the remaining heavy weapon nest. That single kill denied the crew their next burst of suppressive fire, buying the SEALs crucial seconds to shift angles. Overwatch to ground, hostile with RPG, rooftop 785 meters. Cole's reply was immediate. "If that launcher gets a shot off, our left side's gone. Take him." A winum. The RPG gunner leaned into position, the weapon tube glinting in the haze. Adriana adjusted for the angle, aiming not at the man's chest but at the exposed warhead. A hit that would disable the launcher without detonating it in place. Her round struck just behind the grip. The man screamed, dropped the weapon, and tumbled from the rooftop. By minute 12, enemy fire had lost its rhythm. The once coordinated barrage became sporadic, uncoordinated, each group unsure if they'd be the next to fall. Adriana's presence had turned the fight from a siege into a hunt, and the hunted knew it. Cole's men began to press outward, reclaiming ground. Without their long-range support, the infiltrators were forced to close distance, and that was exactly where the SEALs thrived. Close quarters engagements ended quickly and decisively. At minute 17, Adriana neutralized the last remaining marksman on the ridge. She called it over comms with the same even tone she'd used for her first kill. All Overwatch threats eliminated. Recommend ground units advance. Collapse. The enemy broke. Some retreated toward the breaches in the fence. Others tried to vanish into the structures at the perimeter. A few tossed down weapons entirely, hands raised. The sharp staccato of battle faded, replaced by the crackle of radios and the low moans of the wounded. Cole stepped out from cover, scanning the ridgeline. His headset crackled as Adriana gave a final sit rep. "Tower clear. Awaiting further tasking." He keyed the mic but didn't answer right away. Around him, his SEALs exchanged glances, half disbelief, half awe. One muttered, "That wasn't just good shooting. That was surgical." Another shook his head. "She's not who we thought she was." Cole finally spoke. "Overwatch, Hold position until I get to you. His voice carried something new, not just authority, but respect. When he reached the base of the tower and looked up, Adriana was already breaking down the rifle, her motions as calm as if she'd just finished a morning drill. No visible adrenaline, no victory grin, just the quiet focus of someone who had done exactly what she came to do. In 20 minutes, she'd taken a team on the brink of being overrun and handed them back the fight. And in doing so, she'd rewritten her place in their eyes forever. The battlefield had gone still, save for the distant thrum of helicopter rotors and the low crackle of small fires eating through debris. Smoke hung in the air like a gray curtain, carrying the acrid scent of gunpowder. Commander Nathan Cole stood at the base of the observation tower, helmet in hand, watching Adriana Vega descend. The Mark 11 rifle was slung over her back, her movements steady and deliberate, exactly as they had been going up. When her boots hit the dirt, he stepped forward, stopping just short of her. His gaze swept over the woman in dusty maintenance coveralls, trying to reconcile her with the sniper who had dismantled an assault in less than 20 minutes. "I need you to explain to me what just happened," he said, his voice low but firm. Adriana set the rifle on a crate, cleared the chamber, and met his eyes. "You were under fire. Your sniper was down. I had the skill and the angle to end it, so I did." "That's not what I mean," Cole pressed. "Where did you learn to shoot like that? No one does what you just did without years of training." For a long moment, she stayed silent. Then she reached into her pocket and pulled out a worn, black and white photograph. A young girl stood beside a tall man in jungle fatigues, a scoped rifle resting on his shoulder. "Master Sergeant Alejandro Vega," she said softly. "Special Forces, Vietnam. They called him Spectre. He was my grandfather. He trained me from the time I could hold a rifle. Wind reading, range estimation, concealment, patience. Everything." Cole took the photo, studying it. "I've heard the name. Never thought I'd meet his bloodline." "I tried to enlist as a sniper," Adriana continued. "Perfect scores, perfect evals. Didn't matter. They kept me in support roles. Wrong gender, wrong politics. So I took this job, stayed close to the rifles, and waited. Today was my chance." Cole's eyes narrowed, but not in doubt. In understanding. 2 days later, Adriana's name appeared in a classified after-action report. The language was clinical. Civilian contractor displayed advanced marksmanship and tactical judgment under hostile fire. Actions directly neutralized enemy Overwatch assets and prevented further casualties. Within special operations circles, the story spread fast. Some saw it as proof that skill wasn't bound by uniform or title. Others chafed at the idea of a civilian outperforming trained operators. But no one could deny the result. Cole personally pushed a commendation request up the chain. In quiet phone calls to trusted contacts, he repeated the same line. "If you're talking about capability, talk about Adriana Vega. Credentials don't make you lethal. Skill does." On the morning before her leave, Cole found her back at the range. She was resetting targets like nothing had changed. "You know," he began, "I've seen great shooters and great tacticians. I've never seen both in one person the way I did in you." A faint smile touched her lips. "My grandfather always said, a rifle is just steel and wood. The weapon is the mind behind it." Cole nodded. "Maybe the bigger weapon is realizing the system doesn't always know who its best shooters are." They stood in silence for a beat, the air cool and sharp. "You changed how I see a lot of things, Vega," he admitted. "Rank, uniform, title. None of it means a thing if you can't deliver when it matters." Adriana glanced toward the distant steel targets, her eyes narrowing as if measuring the wind. "Performance is the only rank I've ever cared about, Commander." Then she picked up her clipboard and walked the line, just as she had every morning before. But for those who had fought beside her, she was no longer the invisible woman sweeping brass. She was the ghost who had turned the tide of a battle, one shot at a time. In the end, Adriana Vega's story wasn't just about a battle won. It was about the quiet truth that ability often hides in plain sight, and that titles, uniforms, and appearances can blind us to real talent. In today's world, how many people do we walk past every day, at the grocery store, in the office, in our own neighborhoods, without realizing the depth of their experience or the skills they carry. How many veterans, workers, or neighbors have stories, abilities, and wisdom that never get recognized simply because they don't fit the expected mold? Adriana's actions are a reminder that leadership means looking beyond labels. It means asking, who here has the capability, instead of who here fits the description. For those of us who've lived long enough to see how the world changes and how often it forgets its own history, her story hits home. We know that some of the greatest lessons, the sharpest skills, and the deepest strength often come from unexpected places. So here's the question I want to leave you with. In your life, have you ever underestimated someone only to discover they were far more capable than you thought? Or maybe you've been that person yourself. Share your thoughts in the comments below. Let's make this a place where real stories can be told and real lessons shared. If this story moved you, taught you something, or simply made you think, please give it a like, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who might need the reminder. Because sometimes the most extraordinary people are the ones no one notices until the moment the world needs them most.